The old house stood on a quiet street like any other, but behind its walls, a different story played out. People who lived nearby had no idea who their neighbor really was. They saw a man who kept to himself, a man who waved politely but never stayed to chat. He was just a normal person, or so they thought. Mrs. Gable lived next door, and she liked to watch the street from her window. She saw the man coming and going at odd hours. Sometimes he carried bags that looked heavy. Other times he met people in dark cars late at night. She wondered what he did for a living, but she never asked. He seemed like a private person, and she respected that, but something was off she could not explain. Old Mr. Henderson lived across the street, and he had a dog named Sparky. Sparky loved to bark at everything, but he never barked at the man. Mr. Henderson found that strange because Sparky barked at the mailman, the squirrels, and even the wind. But when the man walked by, Sparky would just wag his tail. Mr. Henderson thought maybe the man had a way with animals, a gentle touch that calmed them. Young Sarah lived down the street, and she was a student. She saw the man working in his garden sometimes. He grew flowers and vegetables, and he seemed to care for them very much. She thought it was nice to see someone take pride in their home. She also saw him reading books outside on his porch. They were always thick books with serious covers. She wondered if he was a professor or a writer. Nobody knew the man's name. Nobody knew where he came from. He was just the quiet neighbor who lived in the old house, but the police knew his name, and they knew what he did. They had been watching him for a long time. They knew he was a criminal, a very smart and dangerous one. He was a mastermind, a person who planned big crimes. The police called him the professor because he was so good at planning. He could think of every detail and every possible problem. He could outsmart anyone, but he was also very careful. He never left any clues. He never got caught in the act. He was like a ghost, a shadow moving in the dark. Detective Harding was the one who had been following the professor. He had been working on the case for years. He knew everything about the professor's past, his habits, his friends. He knew that the professor was planning something big, something that could hurt a lot of people. He needed to stop him, but he needed proof. Harding drove by the professor's house every day. He watched him from a distance. He tried to find a way to get close, but it was not easy. The professor was always careful, always watching. Harding felt like he was playing a game of chess with a master player. One wrong move and he would lose. One day Mrs. Gable saw something strange. She saw a van parked outside the professor's house. It was a plain white van with no windows. Men were carrying boxes into the house. The boxes looked heavy, and they were all the same size. Mrs. Gable wondered what was in the boxes. She felt a bad feeling in her stomach. She called the police and told them what she saw. She did not know if it was important, but she thought they should know. The police thanked her for the call. They said they would check it out. Mrs. Gable felt a little better, but she was still worried. Harding got the call about the van. He knew this was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He called for backup, and he drove to the professor's house. He parked down the street and he waited. He watched the van and he watched the house. The men finished unloading the boxes. They got back in the van and drove away. Harding waited a few minutes to make sure they were gone. Then he got out of his car and walked towards the house. He had a search warrant in his pocket. He was ready to go inside. He knocked on the door. The professor opened it. He looked surprised to see Harding. He tried to act normal, but Harding could see the fear in his eyes. "Hello, detective," the professor said. "What can I do for you?" "I have a search warrant," Harding said. "I need to come inside." The professor hesitated, but he knew he could not stop Harding. He stepped aside and let him in. Harding walked into the house. It looked normal at first. There were books and furniture and pictures on the walls, but Harding knew that something was hidden. He started searching the house. He looked in every room, every closet, every drawer. He found nothing. The professor watched him with a smug look on his face. Harding felt frustrated. He thought he had missed something. Then he noticed something. There was a rug in the living room that looked out of place. It was covering a part of the floor that was different from the rest. Harding bent down and lifted the rug. Underneath the rug was a trapdoor. Harding looked at the professor. The professor's face turned pale. He knew he had been caught. Harding opened the trapdoor. Underneath was a staircase leading down into the darkness. Harding pulled out his flashlight and pointed it down the stairs. "After you," Harding said to the professor. The professor went down the stairs. Harding followed him. The stairs led to a hidden room. The room was filled with computers and maps and weapons. There were also the boxes that Mrs. Gable had seen. Harding opened one of the boxes. It was filled with money. Harding looked at the professor. He knew that the professor was planning something big. He just did not know what it was. He needed to find out. "What is all this?" Harding asked. "What are you planning?" The professor did not answer. He just stood there silently. Harding knew that he would not talk easily. He would have to use other methods. He arrested the professor and took him to the police station. He put him in a small room and questioned him for hours. The professor refused to say anything. He was a tough man, a man who did not break easily. Harding was getting tired, but he did not give up. He knew that he had to find out what the professor was planning. He knew that lives were at stake. He decided to try a different approach. He brought in Mrs. Gable, Mr. Henderson, and Sarah. He asked them to talk to the professor. He thought that maybe they could get through to him. Mrs. Gable told the professor that she was scared. She said that she had seen the van and the boxes, and she knew that something bad was going to happen. She asked him to stop whatever he was planning. Mr. Henderson told the professor that he was disappointed. He said that he had always thought the professor was a good man, a man who cared about animals. He asked him why he was doing this. Sarah told the professor that she was confused. She said that she had seen him reading books and working in his garden. She asked him why he was wasting his life on crime. The professor listened to them. He looked at them with a strange expression on his face. Harding could not tell what he was thinking. Finally, the professor spoke. He said that he was sorry. He said that he had made mistakes. He said that he would tell them everything. He told them that he was planning to rob a bank. He said that he had been planning it for months. He said that he had all the details worked out. He said that he was going to get away with it. But he also said that he was having doubts. He said that he was not sure if he wanted to go through with it. He said that he was tired of living a life of crime. Harding was relieved. He had finally got through to the professor. He had stopped him from committing a crime. He thanked Mrs. Gable, Mr. Henderson, and Sarah. He said that they had helped him save lives. He said that they were true heroes. The professor was sent to jail. He was punished for his crimes, but he also got a chance to start over. Decided to use his intelligence for good. He became a teacher and he helped young people learn. The neighbors went back to their normal lives. They felt safer knowing that the professor was gone. They learned that you never really know who your neighbors are. They also learned that even the worst people can change. Mrs. Gable continued to watch the street from her window, but now she looked for good things, not bad things. Mr. Henderson continued to walk Sparky, but now he looked at people with more kindness. Sarah continued to go to school, but now she studied harder and she appreciated her life more. The quiet street was quiet once again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was a quiet filled with peace and hope. The old house stood on the street like any other, but now it had a new story, a story of crime and redemption, a story of neighbors who spoke out and made a difference. Life on the quiet street slowly found a new rhythm as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. The memory of the professor's criminal activities faded a little, but it never fully disappeared. It remained like a faint echo in the minds of the neighbors. Mrs. Gable still sat by her window, but now she watched children playing in the park across the street. She saw young couples walking hand in hand and she smiled. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Mr. Henderson continued his daily walks with Sparky. He greeted his neighbors with a friendly nod and a kind word. He even stopped to chat with some of them. He felt a new connection to the community. Sarah focused on her studies. She dreamed of becoming a doctor and helping people. She joined a study group and made new friends. She felt grateful for her safe and happy life. Even the old house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The paint looked brighter and the garden seemed to bloom more beautifully. One sunny afternoon, a moving truck pulled up in front of the old house. A young family got out and began unloading their belongings. They looked like any other family, but the neighbors watched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. They wondered who these new people were and what their story might be. Mrs. Gable brought over a plate of cookies to welcome them to the neighborhood. Mr. Henderson offered to help them carry some boxes. Sarah even baked a cake with her mother. The new family was touched by the neighbors' kindness. They introduced themselves as the Smiths. They had moved from a big city to find a quieter place to raise their children. As the Smiths settled in, the neighbors learned more about them. Mr. Smith was a writer and Mrs. Smith was a teacher. They had 2 young children, a boy named Tom and a girl named Lily. The children quickly made friends with the other kids on the street. Soon the sounds of laughter and games filled the air. Life on the quiet street continued to evolve. The memory of the professor served as a reminder of the importance of community and vigilance. The neighbors learned to trust each other, but they also learned to be aware of their surroundings. They formed a neighborhood watch group and they kept an eye out for anything suspicious. One evening, Mrs. Gable noticed a strange car parked down the street. It had been there for hours and she didn't recognize it. She called Mr. Henderson and they both went outside to take a closer look. They noticed that the car had out-of-state license plates and the windows were tinted. They couldn't see who was inside. They decided to call the police. A patrol car arrived a few minutes later and the officers approached the car. They asked the driver for identification and they ran a background check. The driver claimed to be a tourist who was lost, but the police were suspicious. They searched the car and they found a map with several houses on the street marked. One of those houses was the Smith's house. The police questioned the driver further. He eventually admitted that he had been hired to spy on the Smiths. He wouldn't say who hired him, but the police suspected it had something to do with Mr. Smith's writing. He had been writing a book about corruption in the city. The police arrested the driver and they warned the Smiths about the threat. The Smiths were shocked. But they were also grateful for the neighbors' vigilance and the police's quick response. They decided to take extra precautions to protect their family. The incident brought the neighbors even closer together. They realized that even in a quiet community, danger could still lurk. They renewed their commitment to looking out for each other and keeping their street safe. Life on the quiet street went on, but it was a life lived with awareness and a deep appreciation for the bonds of community. The legacy of the professor had taught them valuable lessons they would never forget.